This presentation is on using visual supports in the classroom. So what are visual supports? Visual supports are things that we see. They often give us information and help support communication. It can be things like body language. Crossed arms can tell us that someone is maybe feeling angry. It could be gestures. A wave we know means that someone's saying hello or goodbye. Facial expression. A frown communicates something very different to a smile. Environmental cues, things like thunderclouds, water boiling on the stove. Can be photos, so catalogues, travel brochures, car brochures. It can be signs in our environment, so on the road, a sign for a bathroom. Pictures are another form of visual support, so things like a furniture assembly instruction from IKEA. And we can also have text as a visual support, so recipes, reminder notes. So we all use visual supports all of the time. How many of you use a calendar, write a shopping list, have a diary, write to-do lists, look at the road maps when you're driving? These are all examples of visual supports. So on this slide we have some pictures showing some of those visual supports. So how many of you look at the pictures that go alongside a recipe to make sure that you're doing it right? Or how do you know where the bathrooms are when you're on holidays and you don't speak the language? Visual supports help you to know the answer to those questions. Who can benefit from visual supports? So visuals are all around us and we all use visuals to support us in our everyday life. They can support children who are easily distracted, those who follow the group and copy others, have difficulty attending to a speaker, those who find it challenging to listen in a busy environment, those who find change or transitions to be challenging, young people who have language, hearing or other impairments, or who are learning English. Visual supports can also be helpful for the adults in the room. So in particular, if someone doesn't usually work in that classroom or that area, visual supports can also help them. So why should I use a visual support? Research shows that communication is 56% visual, so gestures, handouts, calendars or body movements. It's 37% vocal, so the intensity and the tone of our voice, the volume and the speed of speech, and it's only 7% the actual message or the words. So spoken words are transient and fleeting. So once we've said it, it's gone. Spoken words can be abstract. They might be worded differently each time, and it relies on the listener paying attention, understanding what has been said, and also remembering what has been said. Visual supports are always there. They're easily recognizable and they're consistent and they don't change. So when giving instructions, which is easier for the pupils to understand? A verbal instruction of go get your maths book, turn to page 27 and start reading problem 6, or a visual of a maths book alongside page 27, problem 6. What can I use visual supports for? Visual supports can be used in a variety of ways across the school day as well as in the home. We can use them to support learning a new task, a routine or a skill. They can be used to motivate, to break down complex tasks into steps. You can use them when it's important that your message is understood. You can be used when a student is using an unsafe behaviour to communicate. They can help to decrease anxiety, increase independence, and to increase and reinforce success for specific skills or behaviours. So what counts as a visual? Anything a student can see, which supports your message, facilitates comprehension, eases communication, and enhances learning and memory. So what types of visuals are there? So these are just some examples of more commonly used visuals, and we're going to talk about each one. So we can have a visual schedule, a first then board, or now and next, choice boards, activity boards, communication boards, social stories, objects of reference, task or activity completion, task activity supports, labels, or environmental visuals, and behaviour supports. So the first one we're going to talk about is visual schedules. So visual schedules provide a variety of information. They tell us what is happening today, so our regular activities like snack, lunch, literacy. They can tell us about what is happening today that is new, different or unusual, so maybe we have a visitor, maybe the school nurse is coming in today. They can tell us what is not happening today, so that we can be prepared for maybe a favourite activity not happening. Maybe swimming is cancelled this week. They tell us what the sequence of events is, so we know what to expect and when to expect it. And they tell us when it is time to stop an activity and move to the next activity. So this is something that could be linked to a bell. So when we're thinking about visual schedules, first we need to divide the day into segments. So is it going to be all of the day or part of the day? We select a representation system. Is it going to be an object or a picture? Are you going to have the schedule going left to right, which obviously supports reading, left to right, or is it going to be top to bottom, which developmentally comes first? We need to select a format. So we need to think about who is the schedule for. Is it for a whole group or a whole class, or is it for an individual? Where is it going to be used? How big does it need to be? And what will it look like? So is it going to be a wall chart? Is it going to be in a binder or a folder? Are you going to have it on a strip? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be stuck on a wall? Is it going to be on a pupil's desk? Is it going to be in a pocket? How mobile does it need to be? We also need to decide how the pupil is going to participate in the schedule preparation. Are they going to place the symbols on the schedule themselves? Are they going to have a choice in the order of some of the things during the day? How's it going to work? And then you also need to decide how the schedule will be used throughout the day. Are you going to cross off the activity that's been completed? Or are you going to take the picture of the object off, turn it over? Are you going to point to the next activity and use verbal routine? Are we going to use an object to guide our transition to a new location? So lots of things that you need to decide before implementing the visual schedule. So these are some examples of visual schedules. So the one on the left is of objects. The one in the middle is whole days, so it has the whole week there. And the one on the right is a morning, so where it's ticked off when you finish what needs to be done before going to school. Next thing we're going to talk about is first then or now and next boards. So these are helpful for following directions and learning new skills. They can be used to motivate by having a less preferred task followed by preferred activity. First writing, then games. It's vital that the then or the next activity is given immediately in order to maintain trust. They can be used to break a visual schedule into smaller segments, so you can just show what's happening right now and immediately after. So you could have a whole or a part day schedule for the whole class, and then an individual pupil can have their own now and next. So it has the same symbols showing what they need to do right now and what's going to happen afterwards, so they can work together. These are some examples of now and next or first then boards. So now homework, next watch TV. First social stories, then recess. They can obviously be used at home as well. So you have that consistency. Now pyjamas on, next supper. Choice boards are what we're going to talk about next. So a choice board is a visual 2 or 3-dimensional exhibit of the choice of possibilities for things such as leisure activities, what to eat, what song we're going to sing, what we're going to listen to, what job we're going to do. The choices can be expressed as pictures or text, so they can be 2-dimensional, or they can be represented by objects or tangible symbols, so 3-dimensional. So a spoken, i.e. a verbal, presentation of choices often isn't effective. So a pupil mightn't have listened to the whole message. They may not have tuned into the message until you're already mentioning the second or third option, and the message may be quickly forgotten. So you might see this in some pupils who always pick the last option because that's all they've processed or that's all that they've remembered. If we use a visual display, they have time to see all of the possibilities, they have time to think about the decision, and they can check the options as often as they need before making that decision. So the primary purpose of a choice board is to present a visual display of options. It's a strategy that aids or supports the comprehension of the auditory message and the choice situation by circumventing the rapid disappearance of the spoken message regarding choices. So these are some examples of some choice boards. So these can be personalised to the individual, and they can have more or less choices as appropriate. So we have a snack choice board with some leisure activities. It can be for whatever you want it to be. I've seen some people have it for songs. So what song do I want to listen to? What song should we sing next? Activity boards provide the pupil with access to vocabulary that's specific to that task. So this enables them, and also those around them, to request and comment, and provides adults with a good opportunity to model vocabulary which is specific to the task. It can also allow for more independence as well as greater engagement because we've given them the vocabulary that they need. So these are some examples of vocabulary on an activity board for Play-Doh, building a train, playing with Lego. So by using an activity board, we can ensure that staff are consistent with the vocabulary that they're modelling, and that no matter who is playing Play-Doh, we're using the same verbs, we're using the same language. Communication boards are next. So communication boards allow people to communicate through requesting and commenting. They're individualised to the individual. The size and the number varies per page. The vocabulary can be increased, added to over time. It is important that adults model the use of this before expecting a pupil to use it. So we don't expect a child who has heard a word once to go away and immediately use it functionally inappropriate. So then we shouldn't use pupils to use symbols and visuals as soon as we give them to them. So we need to use the communication board in a meaningful way. So for example, pointing to the look symbol and saying look while looking at a book together. So these are some examples of communication boards. Again, different sizes so that they're personalised, vocabulary that is most useful for that young person or child, making sure they're tailored to the needs. Next thing we're going to talk about is social stories. So social stories are short descriptions of a particular situation, event or activity, which includes specific information about what to expect in that situation and why. So they can be used to develop self-care skills, so how to clean your teeth, wash your hands or get dressed. They can help to develop social skills, so things like sharing, asking for help, interrupting, saying thank you. Help with coping with a change to routine, such as teacher absence, or coping with an unexpected or distressing event, a thunderstorm for example, or moving house. They can also aid with self-regulation. So when I feel angry, I can have a break, go to a safe place, count to 10, whatever it might be. Social stories can also help in understanding others' perspectives. So for example, sometimes I shout out the answer in class. This makes the other children in my class feel annoyed. When I know the answer to the teacher's question, I can put my hand up and wait for the teacher to ask for my answer. So understanding why other children are getting annoyed. So these are some examples of some social stories. So we have a staying on topic one, a playing one, when I'm frustrated, what I can do. The next thing we're going to talk about are objects of reference. So these are objects which have meaning assigned to them. They can represent an activity. So for example, a drink is represented by a cup, lunch might be represented by a spoon, swimming by a swimming hat, a sensory room by a fibre optic strand. They can represent a place. Home might be represented by a key to the front door. Bedroom might be represented by a cushion or a sleep pillow. They can represent people. So a wristband or a bracelet might be used to signify a particular person. We can use objects of reference to aid memory. So we all use things to aid our memory. So we all use diaries, lists, timetables. So objects act in the same way. We can use them to aid understanding. So we all need strategies to help us understand. We might write something down, we might read and reread. Objects give us more information than a word or a symbol or even a sign, so they're easier to understand. We can use them to enable an anticipation of events. So every time the teacher takes out the parachute, for example, we play a fun game. So I know that that object means fun. We can also use them to aid expression. For example, a child can go to the wall where the object of reference are stuck and take the one that represents a drink to show that they want to drink. So these are some examples of some objects of reference. So they may change depending on the individual and the situation. So the band for swimming, for example, in the middle there, someone else might have a towel piece or goggles or a swimming hat. So again, it's something that's individualized to the young person depending on what they associate with that person, that place, or that activity. The next thing we're going to talk about is task or activity completion. So task completion, work systems that have visual supports, can help to teach cause and effect. They can show how much work, what the work is, what happens next, help with the concept of finished, and also the concept of a motivator or a reward. So they help pupils to work more independently and know exactly what they are expected to do. So these are some activity task completion examples. So on the top left you can see I need to complete the rectangle, the star, the square and the triangle before I can play. On the top right I need to do tasks 1, 2 and 3 and then I can play in the computer. And on the bottom I need to complete 5 tasks before I can have the crisps. The next one is task or activity supports. So these are supports which are used within a task. So they could range from a visual sentence strip to step by step, and they're individualized. So for example, it might be supporting a pupil to answer a WH question, like what's happening, by using a colourful semantics strip to show the sentence should take the structure of subject, verb, action, place, e.g. the girl is eating dinner in the kitchen. So these are some examples. So the one I was talking about using colourful semantics, you can see in the middle, be an example. So what's happening, who, what doing, what where. The one on the right, I need some help, I can still work. The one on the left is breaking down that steps. So to complete this task I will 1, 2, 3. What do I actually need to do? Labelled and environmental visual supports, so they can help to communicate the limits which are part of an activity and also show where items are or show where items belong. So an example might be a stop symbol being used in the playground. We might use a not available symbol on a computer to show it's not available right now, we can't play in it. Might label areas in the classroom to show what happens there, so we might have a reading corner, workstation, and you might have cupboards that are labelled that show what's inside. So environmental symbols can show where a pupil is meant to work or what is meant to happen in that area. So these are some examples. So they're not available to show when an activity or a toy can't currently be used. The environmental ones that might go in your cupboard. And then on the right you have your workspace, so showing that this example, Kyle, this is your workspace, this is where you are keeping yourself while we're doing work at the table. Next one is behaviour supports. So visual behaviour supports can gain and maintain attention, support students to stay on task so that they need less direct adult support. They can make directions clear and concise, encourage simple, routine communication, and help pupils to remember things that need to be remembered. So it might be things like reminding pupils of the rules of the classroom, so hands up to talk, wash our hands, one that we're going to be doing a lot, or they could be used to help pupils remember what needs to be done. So when coming back inside after lunch, you could have a visual up of coat off, hang up coat, wash hands, sit on carpet, so they know exactly what needs to happen. So these are some examples of behaviour support. So we have a whole body listening, what the expectations are, sit, quiet, work, our voice, so in the classroom we're using a 3, and the zones of regulation. So what zone am I in? What tools am I using to keep myself focused, calm, and ready to work? And last one we have is signing a natural gesture. So signs and natural gesture are visuals that augment understanding of language and expressive language. So we all use natural gesture all the time without even thinking about it. You can also use signing, so Makaton is used quite frequently. Don't know how many of you recognise Mr. Tumble. And it's another way to support the understanding of pupils of what is happening and what they need to do. So visual supports, how do I start? So the first thing would be to complete a visual support audit. This example is a draft visual audit that was created as part of a visual working group in South Ayrshire, but have a talk with your school speech and language therapist or your locality speech and language therapist and see what audit is best for you to use, because there are lots of other ones available. So for example, there's one from the Communication Trust which is called Communication Supporting Classroom Observation Tool. So it just helps you to identify the areas of need and choose a visual to focus on. So that's another page of that. So really, when using a visual audit, you should have each staff member should take a look at their classroom environment, and they need to think about the visual supports that are currently being used. How could these be made better? Are they working? What other visuals could be in place? The next thing to think about is decide what visual support needs to do. So is it going to be to provide choices, to give information about transition? Is it going to give information about people's whereabouts? Is it going to maybe give information about what's happening next? Is it to help organise things, encourage participation, or is it to encourage independence? So you need to decide what's it going to do. The next thing to do is to establish what the pupil understands. So the visual hierarchy states that real, tangible objects are the easiest to comprehend because they are concrete and the least abstract. Writing is hardest to comprehend because it's the most abstract, and photos lie somewhere in the middle and they're easier to comprehend than symbols. However, research into the natural acquisition of sign language and arbitrary gesture has demonstrated that iconicity of the symbol or the sign doesn't influence first word learning in young people. The use and usefulness of the symbol or the sign is more important than the iconicity. So in other words, it's important that you provide receptive input in genuine, meaningful context to provide the student with the opportunity to learn the meaning of the visual support, no matter what sign, symbol or object you choose. So it really is that modelling and that receptive input, so making sure they understand what it means. So while it is important to make visuals clear and specific, we need to try and avoid being too literal. So for example, using a photo of a very specific cup to indicate a drink, because this may cause a pupil to assume that that visual represents a very specific cup and not all cups. We also have to be consistent. The visual used to represent something should be the same across the school, so you need to agree on a set of symbols and stick to them. So a student who has learned that, for example, a symbol of a cup and an apple indicates snack or break time should not find that when they move to a new class, snack or break time is now represented by an orange. So a lot of the schools have access to Boardmaker Online, so it could be worth nominating a visual champion in your school who can maybe make a set of symbols for the environment and for schedules that could then be saved as PDFs and shared across the school. It's also worth speaking with other schools, maybe schools that feed into your school, so that there is consistency if pupils are moving to a different education setting. Step 3 is making your visual durable. So use laminate, cardboard, poster board, carpet squares, Velcro, blue tack. You need to decide on a location and a framework. So is it going to be for an individual, a group, or both? Is it going to coordinate with time? So for example, a bell. Is it going to be in a consistent place, or is it going to move around? Are pupils going to need to be able to access it? Is it going to be in a central place where everyone can see it? How big does it need to be? If it's something like a schedule and you have extra pieces, how are they going to be stored? If it needs to be portable, can it go in a lanyard, in a binder, or maybe on a clipboard? At the moment, we also need to think about whether it can be cleaned. How can it be cleaned? Who's going to do it? How often does it need to be cleaned? Step 4 is decide how it's going to be used. So, is the adult using it to support understanding of a task? Is it student-led? So, for example, a communication board that the student is using to ask for a drink and is initiating that communication. If it's something like a schedule, how are you illustrating that an activity or a task is finished? So, are you taking pictures off? Do you have a finished envelope? Are you turning it over? Is the visual specific to a task, or is it going to be used on multiple occasions throughout the day? Step 5 is use it. If you're not using it, ask why. If it's not working, change it and be consistent. It's important to remember we can't expect pupils to immediately understand a visual support, so we need to make sure that we provide them with that input in a genuine, meaningful context so that we're giving them the opportunity to learn the visual. We need to be consistent in our use. For example, if using a whole class schedule, it has to be used all day, every day. It can't be abandoned if the member of staff who usually organises it is absent that day. So when thinking about cues and models in visual supports, it's good practice to use open questions. We're going to offer choices. We can do lead-in phrases, descriptive feedback, so as if they would have said it. We can use the symbol boards or their AAC device when delivering prompts or models, so giving them that genuine input, and we're not overloading the child with questions or answers. So, 9 reasons to use visuals. This is just a nice graphic that I like. So, the main message is, please use visuals, be consistent, and remember you need to model. There's no magic wand that makes young people just understand what a visual is and immediately begin to use it. There's lots of great reasons to use a visual, and just make a start and see how you can start implementing them.